Good. We have a busy agenda this morning, so I'm going to get us started. My name is Corinne Waldow. I'm the Senior Director of Economic Vitality at the Boulder Chamber. I know you had Scott Sternberg starting off the Economic Summit before, but you get me today. Today is our continued conversation for the Boulder Economic Summit, our path forward. We started last month with a live and hybrid keynote, and today we're going to be talking our first solutions-based breakout about our current situation and our ever-evolving workforce. We have a great lineup for you today, and I'm excited to bring the information to you and our panel to you today. But to start out, I want to thank first off our co-presenting sponsors again, CU Boulder and Elevations Credit Union, and our Economic Vitality sponsor, Premier Members Credit Union. And to get us started today and to introduce our speakers, we have Mike Smith from Premier Members Credit Union. Take it away, Mike.
Thank you, Corinne. Welcome, everybody. Good morning. My name is Mike Smith. I'm the Senior Vice President of Human Resources and Organizational Development at Premier Members Credit Union. Premier Members Credit Union is a not-for-profit financial institution dedicated to providing financial support to individuals and businesses throughout the Colorado Front Range. We have over 77,000 members, $1.5 billion in assets, and 15 retail branch locations, including 4 locations in the Boulder Valley School District high schools. And we have three new locations coming in 2022. In addition, we care deeply about the community, and that's part of why we're here. Our team dedicates over 1,000 hours each year to volunteer for community and civic-minded causes. In addition, Premier gives approximately $300,000 every year to the communities we serve. So community matters to us, just as the Boulder Chamber matters. And as a result, I get the honor to introduce a fantastic group of speakers and panelists this morning. Let me give you the agenda, and then we'll turn it over and get our meeting started. We have 2 speakers to start things off. Our first one is Catherine Keegan. She's the Director of the Office of the Future of Work for the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment. Her presentation is entitled The Future of Work. Following Catherine will be Colleen Wanetka. She works for the Colorado Workforce Development Council. Her presentation is entitled Job Quality Studies. After our 2 presentations, we'll move to a panel discussion. Our moderator is Corinne Waldow. She's the Senior Director of Economic Vitality for the Boulder Chamber. And joining Corinne will be 4 panelists. We have Kristen Moorfield, Director of Operations for Spark Fun Electronics, Jesse Roller, Workforce Development Consultant for the Boulder Chamber, Chris Houston, Director of Healthcare Apprenticeships for Front Range Community College, and Aaron Jones, Executive Director, Workforce Boulder County. So we have a fantastic agenda. So let's get things started. I'm going to turn things over to Catherine Keegan for her presentation entitled The Future of Work.
Great. Thank you so much, Mike. And thanks to everyone for being here or listening to the recording. I'm going to jump right in because I have 25 minutes to bombard you with a ton of data and information and real context about the economy we have today and what we might expect moving forward. So if you have questions, you can feel free to put them in the chat. I'll also share my email and website so we can follow up afterward. So I can skip over this slide as was shared. I'm Catherine Keegan. I'm the Director for the Office of the Future of Work at the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment. For those who don't know about the office, it was established in September of 2019 to raise awareness and identify policy and program solutions for the future of work to create a skilled and resilient workforce now and in the future. And so with that, part of my role is doing presentations like this to just provide information. We also convene various working groups on specific topics, and I work across state agencies and community and local partners to move issues forward and to ensure that we're taking all of the information we have about where we've been and what we expect moving forward into account as we build new solutions moving forward. But with that, I want to just jump right into the material. And I think it's important to define what the future of work is before I jump in, because it was buzzwordy before the pandemic, it's buzzwordy now, and it means a lot of different things to different people. So for us at the Department of Labor and Employment and in the state, we really tried to take a holistic approach to defining the term future of work. And so when we use that term, we're referring to the impact of a combination of forces on the work we do and how we do it. And we've honed in on four main forces that are impacting the work we do. One is globalization, one is market forces, then we have who makes up our workforce, our demographic shifts in the state, and then of course, technological advances and how those are reshaping the workplace and the skills we need as workers. So over the next 20 minutes or so, I'm going to go through each of these forces. I'll provide some information about how COVID impacted these, and then what the future does look like. What questions should we be asking ourselves before handing it off to my colleague at the Workforce Development Council and for you to hear from people on the ground and the leaders in Boulder and the work they're doing. So when we talk about globalization, we're really thinking about the just increasing internationalization of markets for goods and services. So this includes things like the means of production, supply chains, and how they've extended. We have financial systems that are increasingly international, competition for both talent and goods, and technology and information has just continued to become more global. We've seen that really since the 80s that we've become increasingly interconnected globally, and we've seen how market forces are continuing to shape both local and global demand as well. So in addition to globalization, as we think about market forces, we're really thinking about those shifts in supply and demand, trade, and government priorities, and the impact of those on the economy. So we've seen that, our world has become increasingly interconnected. We've seen some of the challenges with the pandemic, and as we've had various administrations, how priorities have shifted, and those have created real opportunities for some workers, but also put pressure on other workers. I'll be sharing a lot of graphs and data points with you all, and I'm going to go through them probably too quickly just because of the time we have, but the slides will be available. And like I said, I would love to continue the conversation and add to this presentation based on your expertise in your community. Our first graph is showing globalization and really the extended supply chains that we've seen since the 1980s. One of the key things to think about the future of work is that it's not new. These are trends that have been at work for many decades. And in many ways, the work we have available today has already been transformed. So as we look to the future, it's sort of a misnomer because we're looking both in the past and seeing these impacts in our here and now. But what we see is that as these supply chains have extended, we've seen that certain professions have had more pressure put on them, while others have experienced more growth. So as we look at manufacturing, customer support, and related functions, those were more likely to be outsourced early as part of globalization, while more of the administrative and other tasks have not experienced that. And so with that, we've seen sort of disparate impact by certain populations. What we see here is as a result of globalization and market shifts, we've seen that individuals without a four-year college degree have experienced decreases in wages and hourly wages over the last few decades. And I don't want the message from this to be, everyone needs to get a bachelor's degree. That's really not the point we're trying to make, but just that those individuals without a bachelor's degree were more likely to be in impacted jobs. And so as we look to the future, thinking about how we consider the skills and experiences people get from a wide variety of work and types of education and just life experiences, we want to make sure that we're appropriately measuring those skills and creating opportunities for those individuals to thrive and not depending on proxies like bachelor's degrees and advanced degrees as our only way of measuring skills. And so As we look to the future, you'll also see that many of these workers who lack that four-year degree, who were in some of these lower wage jobs, continue to be impacted. And so, prior to the pandemic, you often heard about Colorado's booming economy. We saw how we had record low unemployment rate. We had, just a booming economy, as I said, but this really didn't show the whole picture. This report from the Brookings Institution really focused on, the proliferation of low wage work that was taking place across the US. So they analyzed the entire working population, people who were employed, and they looked from 2012 to 2016 in the American Community Survey from the census. And they found that about 53 million workers, or around 44% of the entire working population, 18 to 64, was in a low wage profession and in a low wage position. And so they considered low wage workers based on their local context. So it wasn't just a blanket nationwide, this is low wage, this is not low wage, but based on their local context and the cost of living in their communities. We see from this data in Boulder that prior to the pandemic, 43% of the workforce was in a low wage job. And we've seen that that's actually an increase over the last 10 years in the percentage of workers in those jobs. And at the same time, their earnings have decreased. So they're becoming more and more low wage. And so in general, what we saw too is that low wage workers tend to be really vulnerable to economic hardship. They rely primarily on their wages to cover basic living expenses, and they don't often have a path to higher wages. 40% of that 53 million received safety net assistance, and they were primarily younger populations and more people of color who made up our low wage workforce. So this is the context before the pandemic, as we were looking at, who makes up our workforce and what opportunity was available. So then we get into our third force, demographic shifts. What we see is that in Colorado, like in other states and across the country, we are aging rapidly, and our younger generations are diversifying. So we see that a significant portion of our workforce will be older workers, people over the age of 50. We also see that our younger populations are more diverse. And so as we're building new programs and services and interventions, we have to consider how well our systems have been serving people of color and whether or not we might need to reconfigure and redesign with those individuals at the table versus investing in, sort of the way we've always done it. We also need to really consider how we build intergenerational workforces. Even with the Great Resignation, we know that older workers will continue to make up a significant portion of our labor force. So how can we capitalize on the diverse skill sets from our diverse populations and create mentorship opportunities, intergenerational engagement opportunities so that we can really, capitalize on those diverse skill sets, because our workforce is only becoming more diverse, both in age and other demographics. All right, so then we get from, who makes up our workforce, sort of the economic context that was shaping the type of jobs available. And you add on to that technological transformation. I think this is the number one thing people think about when they hear future of work is, automation, artificial intelligence, and digitalization, and what that is doing to the type of work that's available and the skills that people need. So as you see here, automation is really referring to the technology that's used to reduce the level of human activity needed to complete a particular task. So it doesn't often completely displace a position, it just changes the tasks that those individuals do, and it replaces certain tasks within an occupation. Artificial intelligence refers to computer systems that can do things that normally required human intelligence, so more of that speech recognition, process management, decision-making, and other types of analysis. And then you have digitalization. I would say this is the thing that we've all experienced in our day-to-day lives and in a professional capacity. So really thinking about how we use digital tools to advance work, to communicate, to collaborate, and to complete our jobs. And so I think about, if you've seen one of my presentations, you've heard me tell this story, but prior to the pandemic, when I got a flat tire and had to get a tow truck, that person was dispatched to me from their employer based on an app. So it was completely digitalized. They had all the information they needed about where I was, where I needed to go, how I'm going to be charged. And that was as I talked to the tow truck driver as he was driving me back to Denver, it was a change in the last few years that he experienced in his job. So just focusing on automation in particular, this graph shows the percent of tasks within an industry that can be done by technology. So this was released in 2017. It wasn't based on the adoption of automation in every industry. It was just showing the level of automation that we had available and the types of tasks that automation can do, and which industries have occupations that might be more impacted by adoption of technology like automation. So on the far left, you have accommodation and food services, where 73% of the tasks could be done by technology, followed by manufacturing, transportation, warehousing. And then on the far right, you have educational services, IT, professional services, healthcare, that are anywhere from 27 to 37% of the tasks in those jobs could be done by technology. So adoption varies depending on the size of the firm, the labor shortages and the needs there. But what we see is that even at the lowest side of things in education services, more than a quarter of tasks can be done by technology. And while certainly we have to consider how people may need to transition jobs and build new skills to work alongside technology as it plays a larger role in their workplace, that's very much part of the conversation, especially on that left side of the screen for those industries. We also need to consider what's the potential for technology to improve job quality, and to think about how we can leverage technology in the workplace to remove some of those more routine, non-cognitive tasks and leave more room for the uniquely human tasks that people that are part of people's work. Then we get into digitalization. This is talking just about how not only are more digital skills required in job postings, but higher levels of digital skills. So while basic computer operations, basic email may have been the way of the world even 10, 20 years ago, now more and more people are expecting a greater use of technology and ability to use technology to do work. And as you can imagine, with the pandemic, this has changed even further. On the right, you can see how across the job market in various MSAs across Colorado that we've seen increasing digitalization in the workplace, just meaning that digital skills are part of the required competencies needed to accomplish those jobs, the work in that community. So we know that even in small businesses, there's 84% of small businesses in the US use at least one digital platform. And across the board, we see that more and more digital skills are part of the way of working. And again, this can create opportunity to remove some of the more challenging parts, or not challenging, but the more routine parts of people's jobs. But it also really highlights the need for everyone to have digital skills to be able to use technology to its fullest. And so this creates a real need to ensure that existing workers, our K-12 system, and all training providers, all of the systems that we're building to improve access to quality jobs includes digital skill development. These charts are from the National Skills Coalition, and they're looking at the percentage of workers employed in these industries who have limited or no digital skills. So based on their analysis, in construction, transportation, and storage, you have 50% of the workers who have limited or no digital skills. At the bottom, you have education, where 15% of the workers have limited or no digital skills. So again, we see some industries where there's a higher need for some of that training, but across the board, there are gaps. And while we may have assumptions about different age groups and digital natives, there are significant gaps across the board for digital skills for workers today. So we were looking at globalization, market shifts, technological advances, and how our demographics in the state were changing. And we expected a lot of transformation over the next 5 to 10 years. And then COVID hit and really accelerated every trend that we were looking at. So adoption of technology in the workplace and advanced technology in the workplace increased. You can see on the right the types of technology that global companies from the World Economic Forum's analysis were going to be adopting or had already adopted. It's cloud computing, Internet of Things, of course, cybersecurity, and just more advanced technologies in the workplace. On the left, you can see that digitalization was more and more the name of the game for workplaces and employers as they were looking beyond the COVID-19 pandemic. And then I think, as we all know, as evidenced by this event, more opportunities to work remotely, creating an even more global labor market and opportunity for workers who may not have been considered or may not have considered themselves in roles that are across the state, across the country, across the world, now can see that opportunity and take advantage of that. And then I think really promisingly, we see, about half of the companies surveyed at this point, this was in December of 2020, that they were accelerating implementation of upskilling and reskilling programs. So the acknowledgement that we all have to play a part in building skills for workers, for unemployed individuals, for students, and for people who are transitioning. At the same time, just like we saw for all of the other future of work trends, the impact was felt differently by different groups. So this is from August 2021. We see the employment levels by salary level in Colorado. So you see that high wage earners in Colorado making over 60,000 had increased employment levels as of August compared to pre-pandemic. Middle wage, which is 27,000 to 60,000 across the state, had a slight decrease, but we're closer to pre-pandemic levels, while low wage earners were at a negative 30% employment level. So as we see, we know that those individuals that were in low wage jobs were more likely to be people of color, our younger populations, and had experienced sort of the largest impact in terms of employment as a result of the pandemic. We also saw that older workers were more likely to be laid off early in the pandemic, and we have all seen about the Great Resignation and retirement rates increasing. One thing I think that is important to just consider as we look to this new phase of the pandemic was a study in California. One study found that the frontline workers in that state accounted for 87% of the state's COVID deaths. And so as we consider the types of jobs that are available, how we're connecting people to new opportunities and higher quality jobs, thinking about who has been most impacted by COVID closures, by COVID itself, will be a big part of that calculation. Obviously, California is not the same as Colorado, but I think it highlights the disparate impact for these workers across the board. All right, so we've seen a huge amount of change over the last few decades and over the last 2 years. And while we can predict sort of, what trends we expect to continue, how we might create a more agile workforce, I think it's important to consider, what does it mean to be a future-ready worker? What are the types of supports that we should be thinking about including in our system, and how do we reconfigure based on what we know about these impacts and these trends that we're seeing? And so the last section I have for the next 5 minutes is just really thinking about what are those skills and mindsets of a future-ready worker, and what are those questions that can guide our work forward. So one of the things that we think about is, what does it mean to be future ready? As we were considering, the stimulus dollars and the types of skills people needed to build and what we needed to create opportunities for people to build, we looked a lot at research from Burning Glass, from McKinsey, from other thought leaders about, what does it mean to be future ready? Who are the most resilient workers, and what will help prepare people for success? And so a recent study of 8 major economies and over 100 million workers found that about 1 in 16 of those workers will need to find a different occupation or transform their role within their current industry by 2030, post-COVID. So what they've also found is that there's specific skills and mindsets that make people competitive and more agile for these transitions. So one study from Burning Glass / MZ found that resilient workers are T-shaped. You can see on the left the image of that. These T-shaped workers are both generalists and specialists with broad experience and some specialization. So they have this, the breadth of knowledge and these skills and mindsets to be able to transition to different industries, and then they can develop that specialization as needed. And so within that, one way of looking at it is this, these new foundational skills of the digital economy. So you have human skills, digital building blocks, and business enablers. Human skills being the ability to apply social, creative, critical intelligence to problems, those things that are very uniquely human, often called essential skills or soft skills. Then you also have digital building block skills. So not only is it digital literacy, but the ability to use technology and digital tools and data to solve problems. And so while in the past and decades before, this really was only needed in tech jobs, this is really expected more and more across the board. So analyzing data, managing data, using digital tools, and understanding digital security and privacy in the context of your occupation. And then business enablers are sort of the skills to be able to apply those other skills and special technical skills to the job at hand. So things like project management, business processes, digital design, communicating data in order to move your work forward. And so what Burning Glass and MZ found was that having skills from all three groups can provide workers a significant advantage. And based on their analysis, sort of looking backwards at hundreds of millions of resumes and job profiles, they found that only 1/5 of workers claim skills in all three categories. And I think many of us don't necessarily talk about our skills in these ways. And as we look to the future, the opportunity to consider how we're communicating the skills we have, no matter where they came from, to apply to a future ready job will be critically important. Another way of looking at it, if you prefer pyramids, is just thinking about AQ, EQ, and IQ. So AQ being that ability to adapt, have a lifelong learning mindset, comfort with that, with change and uncertainty, and the ability to thrive in those circumstances. EQ being those socio-emotional skills, uniquely human skills, and then IQ, those technical skills and knowledge, including the digital skills that are required as part of that. So whichever way you slice it, I think those three categories are sort of the main things that I'm keeping in mind for myself as a worker, and then also as we think about what we need to build in our existing workforce and in our workers that will be entering the labor market. And while we know that digital skills are really important, there's not a lot of clarity about, in many cases, there's not a lot of clarity about, well, specifically what digital skills do I need? And so we have a digital skills catalog that we've built to try to start to catalog which skills are needed for work, learning, daily life, what level. And we're building on that with some of the reports from MZ, like that are displayed here, that's looking at the number of job postings with which skills and how we might build programming around that. And so even though we know digital skills and upskilling, lifelong learning are really critical, we know that there's gaps and things that prevent people from being able to access those. So financial constraints, securing time off work, things like childcare remain a barrier across the board. And so as we're building new programs, as we enter this, again, new phase of the pandemic, thinking about how we eliminate those barriers and creatively build programs that meet the needs of Coloradans will be incredibly important. And who is at the table to do that is also incredibly important. So as we think about being digitally resilient, being workers of the future, making sure that we have those learners and workers at the center, and we're also considering the role that employers, government, education can play, and the tech developers themselves can play, will be really, really critical, especially as we're considering sort of local interventions in addition to state interventions. So I'm 1 minute over, and I'll just wrap us up with these questions, and I can drop them in the chat as well. But these are the questions that are coming to mind for us in the Office of the Future of Work, how do we create more quality jobs, which you'll hear a little bit about in our next speaker? How do we ensure technological adoption is done with the workers at the center? How do we support people transitioning to different jobs where that's needed? And how do we redesign training and worker protections to meet the demands of workers? And then of course, how do I myself become future ready? And how do we move that work forward? My light is also telling me it's time to be done. So I'll leave it at that. Happy to follow up with anyone over email, and I'll drop a link to our website so you can see more, but really appreciate the time and for you listening to my onslaught of information.
Thank you, Catherine. And we had a question in the chat, which is this recorded and will we get a copy of the slides? So as you mentioned, we'll have a copy of the slides, and this is a recorded presentation that we will send out to the summit registrants, everybody on here today. So thank you, Catherine, for taking some time today to share that data. Again, your work started prior to the pandemic. It just quickened thanks to the pandemic, and the work just started to move a little faster. We'll now move on to Colleen, who, as you referenced, will go into a little bit more about the job quality and some of the studies the state's done around job quality. Go ahead, Colleen, share your screen.
Awesome, thank you. Well, in the midst of a very tight job market, obviously, attracting and retaining the best workforce is more important than ever. Job quality can keep employers competitive in their field and enable workers to attain the economic stability and contribute to a thriving economy for the state. At the council, we've been working on a few initiatives which intersect to find out more about what companies need so they can attract, train, keep their employees. Okay, there it goes. So first thing we did was members of the Talent Found Network worked with workforce centers, higher education, economic development leaders, sector partnerships, and countless others across the state to survey employers to understand skills gaps, education, and training opportunities they offer and the hiring environment. And so we did get hundreds of employers responding from everywhere from healthcare, IT, advanced manufacturing, and retail. And those results were combined in the Bridging the Talent Gap website, which is an interactive website to look at what the respondents said that they needed. You can look into skills gaps, education gaps, what the employers are looking for, what they currently provide, what they need to provide. So one of the pieces of data is that employers estimate only 47% of tuition assistance in Colorado is utilized. So how can we get people to use those resources that would help them out, help them get to a better job? And just that really kind of highlighted more of a need for connection between employers and learning providers, just to know what's even out there in their area and available. That's definitely, in some cases, pretty significant. Since the pandemic, we've had a huge increase, of course, in hiring challenges, but the importance of education and credentials, that's stayed the same. And they said, large part skills have also stayed the same. So reaching out for all those new skills that Catherine was mentioning that we will need with the shifts in the economy, just once again highlights the training portion. So we've also done a ton of case studies. And so I just wanted to highlight one with New Belgium Brewery. And I put a couple links here, and that'll obviously be on the presentation that you can go to Job Quality or Talent Playbook to see some other case studies. But really, by working with and looking at the quality of jobs, New Belgium has been able to have a really good core group of employees, where 30% of the workforce is at or below $40,000. But when the company achieves the targets, all employees get a substantial bonus. And average turnover over the last 3 years is only 7%. and the average tenure is 5 years. So they have a high value that they place on behavioral interviews, the culture of employee ownership, open book management, and fiscal transparency. So really having employees understand where the business is going, what they're doing, what they're facing, what's going on. So that really helps employees feel engaged and connected, even when there are tough decisions to make. So back to what we got from the survey, because there is no national definition and accepted terminology for what is a quality job. And so by talking to our stakeholders throughout the state, we came up with this framework with 3 levels. And just for ease of being able to see it, I'll break it down and start from the bottom and work our way up. So with communities attracting, really looking for companies, what do we want? What do we want in our community? What are we attracting? How many jobs are they going to provide? And, you know, is it going to help train them and move people up? Or are they just going to be doing that one position forever? Then companies creating those good jobs. Obviously, people talk about wages all the time, but you know, wages is what gets you in the door. That's not what keeps you and makes you happy. Nobody 6 months into a job goes, you know, skipping down the road with their new paycheck. They really want that sense of belonging and really establishing connection to the work that they're doing and seeing a purpose. So by looking at what your employees want and really being interactive. And one of the biggest connection is that frontline supervisor, and that can really make or break a company. And by focusing in on what the managers talk about, how they interact with their employees, and you know, making their people feel valued, along with other benefits, schedule. So there's a lot of components that companies can go into to create really a good job. And finally, at the top, that the leaders are elevating the opportunities for growth. They're challenging their other leaders in the community to make sure that they are connecting. Are we training our people from inside, or are we just hiring externally? How do we want our community to look? How do we want our businesses to look? And really helping to make that meaningful connection and tie in the quality that they want to have for their people, as well as a product that they want to sell to their customers. And so that helps sales as well. So what's important now, obviously, with the changing economy, and we're looking at recovery efforts and what do we do? We're looking into equity and making sure that nobody gets really left behind. We're looking into assessing and finding out what can we do, where are we at? So with measuring job quality, of course, you know, like I said, it can come down if you don't have the turnover. If you can stay open, we have so many businesses that are closing early because they just don't have workers. So helping, you know, keep your region going and prospering. And then for businesses, you want to, of course, keep your employees, keep them happy, keep them providing good service. And you can't really improve what you don't measure. So we have teamed up to do a pilot program with Working Metrics. They have a scoring job quality and diversity index. And so this is a year-long pilot program. So if you are with a business or you know a business that would like to be involved in looking and tracking, and kind of as you see here, you end up getting a little star report out of 5 potential stars. How are we? So that could be something used to advertise your position, kind of that good housekeeping seal of quality. Hey, this is what we have. Or hey, even if you don't score that well, you can't improve it without knowing how you stack up. How do you compare to your competitors? So using this data can also help improve those benefits and decide what it is that will help you really increase your impact. So is what they do is every quarter put in the employee wage data, and they also compare to a year ago. They're looking at diversity and their benefits, you know, what percentage is paid, what do you offer? And this is, with it, especially with this pilot program, your data secure. It is just the company for you to use for feedback. It's not going to be published. It's not going to be used unless you specifically give permission and want that out there. So it is a private result as far as where you score. So there's the reporting, as we said, with the collection, and then that gives the score results. And then you could just kind of make reports and look at that as time goes on, and being able to see, okay, now we want to try this new shift. How does it actually impact? Did it have the desired results? Are we moving fast enough? Are we, you know, moving backwards? We didn't even realize, that kind of thing. So it's got a social impact score. And it does compare it to peer firms that are in the Working Metrics database. But once again, everything and details are stripped out. It's just showing compared to the industry. And then we can look at the diversity racial overview, what percentage of the population you have, the distributions, and also if they're like moving into management. It's not just comparing out the frontline workers. So we are also looking into other technical assistance that can help and companies looking for what to do next. Okay, what can we do with this data? Working Metrics is great for companies, probably ideally closer to 50 employees. They can go much larger than that, but if you only have 5 employees, you know, the percentages just aren't quite going to work out there. But we do have other resources to definitely reach out to. And then on January 11th, we have a workshop up at Boulder and business services. You can connect with them. And Erin, please let me know if there's something else missing from this, or if you want to, I'm not sure if there's an invite yet for the meeting going on the 11th, but feel free and give me any other details there. But yeah, any questions anybody has?
Thank you, Colleen. Why don't you stop sharing at this point? All right, so we heard a lot of buzzwords. I'm gonna have my panel now come off being hidden. So let's have Chris and Aaron and Kristen and Jesse. We are missing a panelist today. Dylan was unfortunately called away and unable to make it today. So we have Jesse, Chris, Kristen, and Aaron joining us today. And we heard a lot of buzzwords between Catherine and Colleen's presentations around job quality, skills, upskilling, reskilling. Someone asked just now, what is the council, by the way? Aaron, since you're on, will you answer that question?
The Colorado Workforce Development Council is a governing body that supports workforce development across the state of Colorado. And they have a website. You can learn more about them. And you can look them up at Colorado Workforce Development Council. You can just Google that and you can learn a lot more about them. And Colleen is a staff member of the council. So that's, yeah.
So we might mention CDLE today. That's the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment. You might hear some acronyms, so call us out on it. If you want to do it, just call us out on it and put it in the chat or the Q&A, and we'll try not to be acronym friendly. We'll try not to be acronym heavy today. But what we've heard a lot today are things like skills. We're going to need to, do a lot of training. There's a lot of individuals that don't have the quality jobs that they would like. And so we have today Jessie Roller, who's actually with the Boulder Chamber as a consultant, but she's on today because she does a lot of our skills-based hiring trainer and has worked for several years doing skillful trainings and working with the Markle Foundation and actually consulting one-on-one with businesses on skills-based hiring in that area. Erin Jones, who is the head of Workforce Boulder County here, right here in your home turf. Chris Houston with Front Range Community College, who manages the healthcare apprenticeships, mostly adult, and Kristen Moorfield, who's the COO of Spark Fund right here in Boulder. But she's on here for a lot of reasons. She could talk about the challenges she's facing, all the creative solutions that she's trying. I think she's trying everything that was mentioned today, but she's also trying one of the ones that we've brought to our community, which is youth apprenticeships. She can talk about several different, but I think you're also on here today to talk about youth apprenticeships. So I'm going to start out today with just a general question. So please describe some of the programs you are implementing that are new or would be considered a divergence from the past as far as recruitment, training, and retaining workforce. And we'll start, let's start with you, Erin, because some of the stuff you're doing is not new. It's what Workforce has always done, but maybe people think of it as new because they have a new and heightened need for it.
Sure. Yes, things have changed over the years, as you can see from Catherine's presentation. So, and our funding has become more robust so that we can support the community need in terms of what businesses are needing and how to build our talent pools locally. So we do have funding that supports incumbent worker training. Now that's a workforce term that I'm just going to kind of break down for you. It's basically employee development. So we do have specific funds that can support if you're a business that has identified a skills gap, or if there's a specific industry recognized credential that you want your workers to earn, that's something that we can do. And it's a good intervention in terms of helping with retention and also helping individuals move up the career ladder within your organization, and also maintaining your own competitiveness within your own industry. So that's something that we would like to make sure our community knows that we're bringing that back into the fold of our toolbox in our local community, as well as other things. We have a computer training center as well. So if you have, we heard about the digital divide from Catherine. We have a computer training center that workers and people who are unemployed, people who are working, can use that our platform and build their skills in a self-paced way. Also, obviously, we have work-based learning programs that we're supporting, which includes we have funds for apprenticeships, internships, on-the-job training, as well as all of our reskill, upskill, and next skill grants that we're looking forward to. So.
And you partner with a lot of people on this call. You partner
Absolutely.
with Front Range Community College. You partner with the Chamber on some of our programs. You partner with nonprofits to help make sure that these trainings, whether it's new people entering the organization or existing employees, a key piece to Colleen's presentation was job quality. Keeping people is also providing them a career pathway. So providing them those skill advancements, so that incumbent training would be a benefit to a lot of businesses who would like to give people those skills necessary to move up that ladder.
Yeah, right. We're working very closely with Front Range Community College right now in identifying specific curriculum that would serve our community. So we're excited about that.
So let's move on to Jessie. So Jessie, a lot of what was talked about today was skills. And I think that, when we talk about skills-based hiring not based on proxies, all of that, could you give a little bit of, answer this question, but talk a little bit about skills-based hiring and why it's really kind of that foundational piece what we might hear from everybody here, or what a lot of businesses might need as a foundational piece to open that toolbox for themselves, as far as doing work-based learning or internships or apprenticeships or even upskilling or looking at different candidates a different way.
Yeah, of course. So as Corinne mentioned before, I've been helping bring skillful hiring practices to the Boulder community. And what it is it's a new and different lens of how you're not only attracting the right talent, but how you're selecting talent, how you're onboarding talent, and how you're retaining talent. So when we talk about skills-based hiring practices, it's really focusing on stepping back and not relying on credentials, because credentials are just one way to get the competencies, knowledge, skills, and abilities to be qualified for your positions. And we're putting up oftentimes barriers that we don't even know about when it comes to, oh, you need exactly these 3 years of experience, or you need a bachelor's degree in a related field. Oftentimes we are making broad assumptions of, oh, we need you to have this competency. Did you actually get it through that experience itself? Well, as we noticed in some of the presentations this morning, folks might not have access or the financial means to gain the traditional path to a career. We want to step back and say, okay, how can we take some of those barriers down? And that's what skillful hiring practices do. They're really identifying and saying, when you rely or you put a credential on a job posting, what assumption are you making? What are you actually looking for? And not only are you becoming more clear about what you want in a candidate, so you're developing a competency-based job posting, but also you're becoming more clear for candidates. You're becoming more inviting in your job postings of, someone reading it and saying, wow, I think, I'm a teacher right now. And just hypothetical, I'm a teacher right now and I'm extremely burnt out. If they're looking at your job, let's say for a corporate trainer position, if you're writing it in a skills-based way, it's a lot more inviting for a teacher to look at that and say, wow, I feel like I could take the knowledge, skills, and abilities that I've developed in this role and use it in a new way. And again, we at the Boulder Chamber, we offer trainings to teach you more about this and how it impacts every single stage of a potential employee experience at your organization.
And it marries well with Erin's programs because, you bring in the right employee and then you can get them some of the trainings and upskill them and, partner with some of our local partners to provide some of those more technical trainings, which Erin used one of those keywords that I think a lot of people know what it means now, but work-based learning. And I think to define work-based learning, it's learning that's done on the job. And there's a spectrum of it. It's everything from, going in and job shadowing, to internships, to micro internships, to projects, to apprenticeships, and learning through work. So there's a big spectrum of what work-based learning is. And it's everything from K through 12 and just bringing somebody in on a tour and learning and job shadowing, to a formal apprenticeship where they're marrying both, the education and the actual on-the-job training. And so we have two people here today to talk a little bit about apprenticeships. But Chris, you're developing apprenticeships in it wasn't a traditional field, healthcare. So can you talk a little bit about the path of how these came about? And you can talk about healthcare, but also some other fields, but how apprenticeships are looking beyond the traditional approach of the hiring and the training.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I really want to piggyback off the previous speakers that note that 44% of the population working is in low wage jobs. Many of the entry-level positions in healthcare are those low-wage jobs. However, unlike kind of skillful training, they do have industry recognized credentials that are regulatory. So you do kind of have to marry this. How do you skill a low-wage worker? And when you look at the barrier to upskilling, the financial constraints and the getting the time off and the childcare situation, apprenticeships are really the pathway that can answer those. What we do, and the reason that we started developing apprenticeships in healthcare is even pre-pandemic, healthcare was really in a hiring crisis. And you can only see so many patients if you have medical assistants to room those patients in the room. You can only do so many operations in the hospital if you have enough sterile instruments. So what we really did is we compressed our learning environment to where a 1-year certificate was going to only take 20 weeks because we were supplementing that with the skills and the work-based learning. So what we found is that it really helped our employers shorten the pathway, because our traditional pathway of you go to school, you do an unpaid internship, then you go get hired was taking too long. And then the burden that placed on the student, the tuition cost, the findings, going to school and not having an income, we found that we also can really appeal to a much more diverse population. And as you see, the diversity in our workforce is growing. This allows us to skill and upskill that workforce that is more diverse in healthcare.
And healthcare is not the only industry that's expanding into apprenticeships. We're going to hear from Chris in a second, manufacturing, but Chris, you have a counterpart in IT right there at Front Range.
Yeah, so Front Range is really looking at this as we have experienced decreasing enrollment because there are other pathways to work, which is a wonderful opportunity for students, but we want to be able to help our employers provide that related instruction and some of those skills that are necessary. So we're looking at apprenticeships, obviously in healthcare, in the IT sector, manufacturing, and we've even started one of the first arborists. A lot of employment demands in that area, and apprenticeships have been able to help our local employers fill that need.
And I've seen them in a lot of industries across the state, and you're going to see a lot of dollars coming down in apprenticeships over the next couple of years to support this on-the-job training. And there's a lot of support around the state to help in this. And Kristen, let's move to you. You can answer this. I already teed you up on the youth apprenticeship. You can also talk about some of the other things that you're doing. But you brought in youth apprentice, and you're hiring another one because you looked at developing, incoming talent, but also this was a nice way to look at, how do I develop talent as well as some of my other, in addition to some of my other recruitment strategies, correct?
Yes, sorry. Finding the unmute button inevitably causes me problems. Yeah, so one of the things that we've done is bring in apprentices, and it's very cool because it has multiple opportunities, right? Both for the apprentice who's coming in and learning skills and learning things on the job that they may not learn in a classroom, or they may not learn even practicing those skills in a classroom. And part of it is our partnership with St. Vrain Valley School District, which has been awesome, because that has also been mutually beneficial in that we've been able to, and will in the future, COVID kind of threw a little bit of a wrench in this, but be able to utilize some of the things that they do with their students to upskill our employees, but then also offer mentorship opportunities for our employees. And so what's been very cool about seeing the apprentices is, yes, the business case for apprenticeships is very straightforward and simple, right? You're building a pipeline for the future. You're building, you're expanding an employment market that we saw with Catherine's presentation continues to constrict, right? So those, and I don't like the term low wage workers, although I know that is applicable, but it's more those entry-level positions, right? That we see that employment market was constricting before COVID, and now it's constricting at an accelerated rate. And so by bringing in apprentices, you're building that pipeline, not only for you, but also for your cohorts that are in your industry. So for us, there's tons of manufacturing in Northern Colorado. And so we're giving these high school students experience that they will maybe be able to utilize in building a professional pathway starting at 16, right? Like I was working at 16, but it certainly didn't have a professional pathway. And so what's very cool is to see, and we're working with a dude named Cody right now, and he is just awesome, right? He is working so hard. He picked up on a ton of skills very quickly. He continues to expand his skills. He's cross-training. He's learning things in logistics as well as manufacturing. And then the other piece of that was we saw sort of a reinvigoration in some of our long-tenured employees, right? Who were like, oh, okay, so Cody comes in and Cody thinks this is cool. Maybe it is cool. Maybe I should teach him how to do this, or maybe I should, see if I can find a way to make this easier for us in the future or identify efficiencies. And then the other thing we saw was that a few of our employees who had either shown interest in leadership positions or not shown interest in leadership positions kind of take him under their wing and be their mentor and help them. And so that also expands their skill sets, which is just, it's very cool to see. Like, there's a ton of business reasons and operational reasons to do apprenticeships, internships, on-the-job training, job shadowing, all of those things. But there's also just tons of retention plays in it as well, and a lot of really powerful opportunities for existing employees, and then also those new employees that are coming in and those apprentices. So it's very cool, and that's one thing that we're doing. it's certainly an interesting employment market.
It fits to Colleen's presentation about job quality. You giving them a purpose and a retention, because sometimes, some businesses can't compete in the wages. I mean, you have to figure out some other ways for retention. Erin's talked about some of them, which is the upskilling and providing them paths into other parts of the organization to give new skills so they can develop and grow within the organization. You're talking about mentoring within the organization. Colleen talked a little bit about employee ownership. So there's, apprenticeship really is that. I've talked to a couple of the mentors of the youth, and I feel like they were reinvigorated in their career because they're now mentoring a youth. I've also seen it in banking, finances, insurance, tech. They have it in a bunch of auto, a bunch of different pathways that are available. And adult apprenticeships are also available in a lot of these areas. So what you would normally see as trades, now we're seeing as also available in apprenticeships. But then also internships, traditional internships, we're seeing that is changing a little bit too. And if Dylan from CU is here, and I'm going to speak on his behalf a little bit, was here, even CU is changed. Sorry, I have a puppy in the background, he's crying. Even if CU was here, they would tell you they're even changing some of their internship model. They're moving to maybe an online micro internship or micro project model to help it make it easier on businesses to get some project-based work done, sample some students, but also give those students some work-based learning and skill development as well. So because the economy evolving what work-based learning looks like. All right, so we need to balance the now and the future. Businesses right now I need people. I think I get 3 or 4 calls a day. Erin, you get 3,000 calls a day. We get a lot of calls. I need people now, but we also have to develop the workforce of the future. So how do we balance those two and continue to invest in both, and maybe even, shorten some of that future work or that training time? And let's start with Chris on that one.
Thanks. Sorry, kind of behind the mute button. That was a really key component, Corinne, of our apprenticeships and healthcare area, is that we really sat down with our employers. And I really want to note that apprenticeships are really employer driven. Like Kristen was saying, it's really finding those components of your work that you want to train. So sitting down with our employers and identifying those critical components that these students needed to learn. What was best learned in the classroom, what was best learned online, and what was best learned at the workplace. We need to be respectful, especially in healthcare, that there's a variety of shifts, there's a variety of times, and so a traditional model of course offerings would not work. What we found at Front Range is we really split our programming. We did the majority of our what we call didactic or lecture work online over a 20-week format, at the same time that the apprentices were coming to their lab classroom 2 evenings a week with optional practice times on Saturday and then working full time. So it's very compressed for 20 weeks. And our apprentices do know that it's a big lift, but with grant funding, they have tuition support either through workforce, through their employer, and through some of our grant funding. We've been able to reimburse them for things like childcare and transportation. Again, some of those barriers that keep them from completing. We have a 95% completion rate of our apprentices, and that's really making the employers happy because they're learning the skills in a shorter time frame, and those apprentices are being able to earn a wage during this whole time. So compression of the programming and looking at the course times really helped our employers.
And sometimes it's just individual skill development. It may not be a full piece, but Kristen, you had talked about sometimes you just need a QA, QC, or soldering, or there's certain programs you might need. Kristen, could you give a little bit of insight into this now and in the future? Because you're a business. I need to fill jobs now to fill my orders to keep my business alive, but I also know that I'm going to have this issue 9 months from now, 3 years from now. How do you balance that?
Yeah, that's a great question. If anyone has any advice, please share. But I think, the big thing for us right now is, and this is a conversation every single day, right? Like, how do we fill the positions we have open? And, I was on a panel a few weeks ago, and one of the things was, it's very difficult to try to look at this strategically right now because you're a little bit of like putting fires out all over the place. We're still applying like as many things as we possibly can that we've done in the past that have worked, and then new things that we're working on, which, I've worked with Corinne, and we've worked with, or going to work with Erin soon, and just identifying like, what are some other creative solutions that we can do to fill roles now? As far as the future is concerned, it's really a lot of building pipelines. So what are opportunities to pipelines? You've got the apprenticeships, you've got the internships. We also offer internal like cross training and job shadowing. And one of the cool things about Spark Fund is that we have everything under one roof. And so you may join us and then all of a sudden you're like, kind of interested in marketing. So you can go and shadow someone in marketing and see if that's interesting to you. So we're building that internally and showing those professional pathways internally for the future growth of the organization. And then we're just partnering with as many people locally as we possibly can because they're all going to be avenues to that future pipeline. So if we can partner with community colleges, if we are already partnering with St. Vrain Valley School District, partnering with Boulder County, partnering with the Chamber, partnering, I've done the skillful training with Jesse, which was awesome. And I actually wrote a note to follow up with you. And then just partnering with as many folks locally as we can so that those positions that can't go global, right? Those positions that can't go remote, we can start looking at what does the pipeline look like for the future, and how do we stop the constriction, which I think we actually had a pretty good pathway before COVID, and then COVID hit and equations for people changed, right? Priorities changed. And so that's why you're seeing that accelerated constriction. But then how do we start opening that up again, right? So it's not just a matter of moving chess pieces around different manufacturers in the area and actually adding pieces to the board. And that's really what our focus is for the future is, yes, there is a fire right now, right this minute, we need to fill, right? I think we have 6 positions open in our manufacturing and logistics departments, but how do we make it so that we don't continue to see these fires? Because they come every few years, right? It's cyclical. And so how do we make sure that we're better prepared for the next time that the workforce constricts by expanding it as best we can with local and even regional partners?
And, oh yeah, go ahead, Chris.
I just wanted to add to that. Kristen, I think one of the things we found when we really worked with health systems on the apprenticeship model is that it dramatically increased the applicant pool. And we did an information session for UC Health for a sterile processing, and they would maybe get 1 to 2 a week. They got 23 applicants in 3 days. That's a recruiter's dream to have. So I think that normalizing the apprenticeship model, that you'll actually get paid while you're learning and you'll get some tuition support, And then I think the pathway of pre-apprenticeships in the high school years and in, right after, to really pipeline them. In Northern Colorado, we had an opportunity to do internships, 5 internships in the healthcare area, 166 students applied. That's 166 students that could be CNAs, that could be MAs. So how do we make sure we're using that work-based learning to kind of start to pipeline them into a more direct career pathway? Even if they want to go on to a 4-year institution, these employers will take them part-time.
That's great. And both Same Brain and BVSD are very open to working on those pathways and things like parents' nights in manufacturing or healthcare, or just to understand what career path, meaningful career pathways in our community are. Erin, you deal with this every day. Now, the future. How do I fill the now, but also how do I develop for the future? And then while you're in there, there's some specific populations that you work with, whether it be veterans or older workers, that also might be some candidates that people might want to look at and contact workforce about, that might be that new population to look at.
Sure. I think the key, and we've heard this today, is partnership. And I've watched the workforce development ecosystem locally get stronger and stronger over the last couple of years. I just want to say that there is the BOCO Talent Collaborative, which is a collaboration of partners all at the table, trying to grapple with some of the issues that we're talking about in terms of hiring, retention, flexible learning, those kinds of things. I think the key is making sure that educators, learners, and business are connected, so that there's a clearer picture of what's needed in the future. What are the skills of the future, and what need to be filled right now? And also, as you say, tapping into some pools of populations that may not be your traditional networks. We are partnered with lots of nonprofit organizations across the county, including Boulder County Housing and Human Services. I was on a call with them last week, and their caseloads are going up for TANF recipients, and it's two parent families are going on TANF. Now, how can we can connect businesses through, we have funds that support work-based learning for that population, and that would be a quick win in terms of helping support people getting access to jobs. And it would also support that low wage folks that have been impacted significantly since COVID. I also think that we do have a veterans program. Tomorrow's Veterans Day, I just want to say. And we have a team of experts that work with veterans. And there's the Department of Labor has a whole list of benefits for employers to hire veterans. So take a look at their website as well. And I just think it's really important to have partners and to really have a listening ear to the business and specific industries' needs. Manufacturing, there could be some overlap, but there's definitely some specific needs in manufacturing, healthcare, information technology. There's a lot of these interventions that can apply and meet the needs of all of them, but really understanding what are the skills, how do we create more flexibility around learning those skills, and how do we make sure we're tapping into a lot of different pools of our local community members.
And just knowing that there are partnerships in this area, businesses aren't alone. Yeah. So the Kristens of the world could work with Front Range, work with Workforce, work with the Chamber, work with Jesse on a skills-based hiring, and get that help. There are navigators within the state system to navigate individuals through the apprenticeship. We have intermediary models within apprenticeships, where if we have multiple employers that want the same pathway, the Chamber is sponsoring some of those, Front Range is sponsoring some of those, that you just have to sign up and participate in their registered training. You mentioned something about veterans, and I sometimes tell the story of my why behind skills-based hiring is particularly around veterans. You see a job posting that says we value hiring veterans, and then you see 6 Sigma green belt required. And a veteran's not going to have gotten a Six Sigma green belt, so they're not going to be able to make it past that first line. So Jesse, like some of those are the types of things that, you know, we have a whole pool of other workers out there, older workers. There are things within just our normal practices that we've been doing over and over and over again that are excluding some of the populations that Erin's mentioning, Chris is mentioning, Kristen's mentioning, just by virtue of doing the same practices over and over again. Jesse, right?
Of course, it's something that you bring up, the importance of language and being intentional. I know that, you know, something that Kristen mentioned of like, oh, there's all these fires going on. You're down 6 people. So you slap a job posting up there because it's like, oh, that's the quickest solution. However, you are doing yourself a disservice, because if you're using the same job posting and you haven't looked at it or adjusted it, you know, for what's going on in the world now, you're putting up these barriers, even though you're like, no, I'm being inclusive. No, you're not. We want to step back and just say, let's rethink this. Let's relook at it. And one thing that I love about the training, it's a 4-part series. And then the second series, I challenge you, your current lens of how you're reviewing a resume and what you're looking at. Because yes, you could change the job posting all you want, but it's a trickle effect. Because if you're hiring skills-based and you're focusing on the skills aspect to be more inclusive of somebody's background of how they're getting the skills necessary, well, now you have to change the way that you are reviewing a resume, the way that you are interviewing, the way that you are having conversations that are being more inclusive and having a heightened awareness of sometimes the bias that's coming into the conversations, whether it be in the interview, whether it be in the selection process. And then just even something that we talk about in skills-based practices of onboarding. Now that we've gone through this process, how can we set that candidate that we just hired for success to hit the ground running versus like, oh, here, we're just going to put you in this job and sink or swim method. Oftentimes the candidate sinks, and we don't want that. We want them to be there and have a positive experience and be there for a long time. And also, you know, creating those career pathways are something that we talk about as well in skills-based hiring practices. So we're here to help. If you are like, oh, I'm struggling with this one area, come to a training. That's why we're here.
And then we're partnered with Erin, we're partnered with Chris, we're partnered with PBSD, we're partnered with St. Vrain, we're partnered with CU. All of us, as Erin mentioned, we have a Boco Talent Collaborative. You're very fortunate to be in Boulder County, where we really, really, really deliberately tried to bring the workforce system together to make it a more collaborative approach, because there's no wrong door with any of us. I feel very strongly about, you know, Workforce Boulder County, and I don't think a lot of people understand all of the amazing programs that have been offered for many years, but it's heightened right now, and this might be that time. So we have a great question that actually comes in from one of Erin's teammates, but it was actually my last question for you. So I'm going to ask, she asked this, but we're hearing a lot about the Great Resignation. You know, it takes up a lot of airspace locally and nationally. I'm actually calling it the Great Reconsideration. I think there's a lot of different ways to look at it. You know, I think the question comes out, we know previous methods aren't working. People are reconsidering. There's the Great Resignation. You know, we're also finding, you know, just looking at the graphs from Catherine, that some people are still struggling to get back in the workforce. Some are doing just fine and then have that opportunity to reconsider, but some are still struggling to get back into the workforce. But we're learning there are a lot of reasons people are not returning to work, or jobs are not getting filled. How do we think the workforce system is going to need to operate to support business and job seekers moving forward? Erin, do you want to start first on this one?
Yeah, I think I am so curious about how we can help our community understand what is a quality job, because I think if we create, if we listen to Colleen today and the state created a framework for that, and it's kind of in its infancy stage in terms of what does a quality job look like, so that we can act. I think that's something that we really need to explore in partnership with everyone here on the call in our community, so that we can build a network of employment opportunities that people want to be driven towards and want to enter and accelerate and advance in. So I think it's going to be important for us to explore that initiative in our local community. And I also think it's going to be important to, make sure we understand what skills-based hiring is all about, and create some flexibility within the workplace. Understand what needs to go fast, what needs to go slow in terms of what businesses need. Really understanding and being self-aware around that. I think some of those pieces that Catherine also talked about, like the AQ, EQ, IQ, understanding the layered approach of what the future is going to need in terms of the workforce. I think as a system, we need to really create a compelling story about the workplace, and for young people to get excited about it, for young people to get excited about Spark Fund. We heard about that, and mentoring people throughout the pipeline. It's not just about one way of doing things like Jesse talked about. It's really being creative and trying to figure this out collectively. That's some of the things that comes to my mind.
Thank you, Erin. Chris, you're shaking your head a lot. I'm going to go to you next.
Okay, Erin, so much agree with you. The points that I'll add to that is we have to acknowledge the diversity of the workforce that is coming up, and we have to support the skills that are needed to get this workforce, both in the, those digital skills, those customer service skills. And I think from an equity perspective, we look at nationally, apprenticeships, 80% are men and 60% are white. So white men have continued to get paid for their training for years and years. We need to rethink who gets paid while they're being trained. So I think we really have to look at that diversity and equity component as we move to workforce. And then I think the other thing for healthcare that I really want to focus on is how do we ladder and upskill? An MA is kind of a dead end position until you, quote, go to nursing school. A farm tech is a certificate and then a 6-year degree program. How do we continue to upskill to provide wage and skill increases while these individuals are working so that they can stay employed? So these agencies aren't always putting out fires, especially for those entry-level workers.
Jesse, and then I'm going to end with Kristen and her youth apprentice.
Yeah. Something I go to is that we've been living now for how long in swimming in uncertainty and change. And I know a lot of folks that are on the call today, you're frustrated, you're burnt out, you're to the point of like you're doing 3 jobs at the same time that you have to do your own. And I encourage you, we need to change. Something needs to change, or, like in not only your organization, but kind of what things that are going on in your life. And we're talking about approaches that can help, and stepping back and being more inclusive of how folks are getting the knowledge, skills, and abilities to do your jobs. And we did rely so heavily on credentials because back, 15 years ago, we were getting way too many applicants. And it was just one way of like, okay, how do we simplify this? Because I'm getting overwhelmed. Now we're going to the other side of things and saying, okay, we need to shift something. So I would encourage you, look at and hear all the things that we're talking about today and say, what could be one thing that you could change and you would help you in your organization to adapt to what's going on in the world of work.
All right, Kristen, and then I have a story to tell too.
Okay. One thing I want to say is I love what you just said, Jesse, because I think it's really important when I attend things like this, and you get like this wide swath of things that people are doing. it is helpful to focus, right? Because you're like, how can I take that? And Sparkman is a great example, right? We're like 100 employees. I wear like 12 different hats. And so it's a matter of like, what is one thing that I can take back and I can actually work on this and implement it? And I think that's just a great takeaway from this, is that, we're giving you things that we've done, but these are also things that I've been working on for over a year, right? And so I've added to my list of things to include over that year, but you start one step at a time and continue to expand what you can do as an organization. And, I took this question kind of at the organizational level, and two things that really jumped to mind. One thing is something that is very vital to our culture, which is our employees are humans first, employees second. And I think that really needs to permeate more and more employers as we're moving into this sort of, on the panel that on the couple panels that I've been on, I say this, but we're moving where work life is no longer a buzzword, right? It literally is. People are trying to figure out, and you saw it in Catherine's statistics, they're trying to figure out how work now fits into their life and into the things that are happening outside of work, right? The childcare, the elder care, the need for vacation because of burnout, the need for mental health, like all of these things that are happening outside of work. People are now saying, you know what, work is no longer necessarily number one. It may be number 3, it may be number 4, it may be number 1, I don't know. But trying to figure out how that work fits into your life and all the responsibilities you have outside of life or outside of work. And so at SparkFun, 2 of our values are people first and respect. And it's so vital. And it's one of the things that I say every time I meet with a new employee is that, I want to know about you. Yes, we're going to onboard. Yes, we're going to check all the boxes, but tell me something that's really interesting or really gets you fired up, because I know that in the future, I can use that, right? I can use that for retention. And I'm not saying that I'm like abusing that privilege, but it's just getting to know your employees. It's getting to know them beyond their function, their role in the organization. And I think that's really important for companies. And then I just don't like buzzwords in general. So when we talk about the Great Resignation, of course it's a thing. There's no doubt about it. I mean, it smacked us in the face, right? We were prepared for the pendulum to swing the other way because 2020 had such low turnover. Any business leader that was paying attention was prepared for the pendulum. I don't think we realized how far the pendulum was going to swing, but everyone was prepared for it to some extent if they were paying attention. And so while I don't like that buzzword, I think what we do is, I think right now we are kind of in a, I can't think of the word, but I'm thinking of something in like the healthcare industry. I was looking at Chris, but we're in the how do we keep our employees who are loyal, who do want to stay with us, who are long tenured, or just they want to be with SparkFun for a long time? How do we keep them from burning out? How do we keep them from saying, you know what, I could go over here, maybe make some more money and maybe work less hours? And it's maybe let's talk. But it's kind of goes back to that personal connection of okay, I know your partner's name. I know your kiddos' names. I know what kind of car you drive. I know your interest outside of work. So, let's just go take a walk. Let's go have an informal conversation and talk about what it looks like for us to retain you and how, and also just give me, it doesn't matter what function you're in. I can take constructive feedback and do something with that, turn those into action items, no matter who you are in the organization. And I think that those are just those are little things that we're doing to try to counteract what we're seeing on the turnover side. But yeah, I think all the things we've talked about today, and again, to reiterate Jesse's point, just picking one thing and saying, you know what, I can take this, I can act on this, and it will have a constructive outcome for my organization is really, that would be success from this call. And I have notes. If you see me looking down, it's because I'm taking notes. So I've also got action items that I'm going to take from this panel. So thanks for including me.
Well, that's great. So Colleen, Scott, and Mike, please turn on your cameras if you can. I'm going to close us out because we're at time. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Mike, our sponsor, for introducing everybody. He might not be on right now. Colleen and Catherine, who are our speakers to start out. And then Jesse, Aaron, and Kristen, and Dylan and Spirit, who are our panelists. And then I want you to see Scott Sternberg on screen because he will be leading the next session on December 16th on our changing workplace. So this was about our changing workforce. We will be talking about our changing workplace, just the space, how things are changing coming out of the pandemic and our changing economy on December 16th at 8 o'clock. You received the Zoom link, but we will resend it. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. The recording will be available. The presentations will be available. Have a wonderful day and happy Veterans Day tomorrow.